The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, our vice chair of the Environment, Manufacturing, and Critical Materials Subcommittee, Dr. John Joyce.
First of all, I want to thank you, Chairman Johnson, for holding today's important hearing. Over the past few years, we have heard the Biden administrations proudly discuss the so-called wonders of renewable energy. And unfortunately, the rush to adopt green technology will have dramatic consequences on the reliability of the electric grid. This year, the Regional Transmission Organization, PJM, released a report on the state of the grid and its load capacity. There were significant decreases in energy resources for the third year in a row, especially in coal. This continued decline of energy has led PJM to project that its reserve margin will decrease from 23% currently to a maximum of 15% or perhaps even as low as 5% by 2030. Through my conversations with Pennsylvania utility companies, I know how close we came last Christmas Eve to rolling blackouts as the temperatures dropped to below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. I am deeply concerned that escalating EPA regulations will further push baseload power generation off the grid and close the critical power plants that are desperately needed for the energy that my constituents rely on summer, winter, fall, and spring. One example in my home state is the closure of Homer City Generation Facility. As the largest coal power plant in the state, losing its generating capacity will move my constituents one step closer to the rolling brownouts that Texas and California have experienced. It could not be clearer that the regulatory uncertainty created by the EPA is a large factor driving investment away from plants like these. Our nation has led the world in emissions reduction, and we can continue to do that through American innovation and American ingenuity. But we cannot afford to let government policies written with a misunderstanding of real world will put Americans at risk. My first question is for you, Mr. O'Loughlin. I'm concerned about how deployable some of the new power generation technology is in the short term. Has a power plant with carbon capture and storage or a power plant that is hydrogen co-fired to date been adequately demonstrated for 24/7 power generation and connected to the grid? Does that exist right now?
It does not. We don't have any examples of those in the United States today. And as I said, the CCS projects that have been demonstrated to date have been at a much lesser reliability and at a lower quantity of flue gas that they've been able to treat. And I think there's been some disagreement about how reasonable this is and what the effect on reliability is. EPA's worked on this rule for 18 months. We now have 60 days to digest it and respond to it. And I guess I would suggest that EPA provide an adequate time for an independent review of the reliability impacts of this rule, because I think there's a lot to it, and I think that it's likely to have a very significant negative impact on reliability at coal plants and at natural gas plants.
I share your concerns about that negative potential impact. Mr. Nazi, utilities have to make decisions in the next few years about the future of their generation fleets, and there's simply not enough time to prove and deploy the technology that EPA expects. For example, if a coal plant does not plan to retire, it must be running with carbon capture and storage at 90% by 2030. Similar decisions will be required for existing natural gas generations, as they are mandated to add carbon capture or hydrogen in similar timeframes. Including the time needed for state regulations to be implemented, how much time will utilities have to decide the fate of their existing fleets? Is it 10 years? Is it 5 years? Is it 2 years? What can we expect?
Well, thank you, Doctor. And on page 11 of my testimony, I put together a graphic because that is really the heart and soul. The reliability problem is that by the time the states get their 2 years, and they'll use every bit of that because they'll need it, that we'll basically have 3 years to build this stuff. And every day at power plants, and I'm at their boards all the time, they're making capital decisions about, can I afford to keep on putting money into a plant? And they always evaluate, how much life do I have? And if I've got a 30-year remaining useful life that just got cut down to 10, I'm not going to make a capital investment. That's what accelerates the retirements, is when you force people to amortize it over a shorter period of time.
Mr. Snickler, without a clear path for path for replacement natural gas generation, what are the options for operators? Will baseload nuclear be available to replace the 140 gigawatts of coal or the 40 to 60% of the coal fleet within 3 years?
Well, given the experience of the nuclear fleet now, there's only one nuclear unit currently under construction in the United States, and that's in Georgia. So I don't think we're going to see a rapid expansion of nuclear resources that are capable of filling that gap. And unless there's a technology breakthrough that we're hoping for, but you can't plan your grid around hope, then we're not going to find ourselves in a spot where we have sufficient resources should those retirements occur. And so the technologies that are evolving and may work, small modular reactors and carbon capture and hydrogen co-firing, all are great on the drawing board, but they're not commercially available today. And if we want to meet those aggressive timelines, you have to have technology that can be deployable now.
I think that you concluded with a great take-home message. We cannot build that just on hope. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield.